Joining me now here on another edition of the Knicks Film School pregame show with the Knicks taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder on the first of 3 games on a road trip to wrap up 2023. We head to Oklahoma City specifically to a friend of the Blue Wire Podcast Network and one member of the Uncontested podcast. Joining me now to talk about this matchup is Jacob Kniffen. Jacob, welcome to the Knicks Film School Podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here and talk some basketball.
So we should tell people up front, the reason that the records on the bottom of your screen do not reflect the current records, because this is airing Wednesday morning, are because we are recording this on Christmas Eve. So we are recording this before the Knicks play the Bucks on Christmas and before the Oklahoma City Thunder play the Minnesota Timberwolves on Tuesday. So a couple games have happened since we have happened since we had this conversation. So we'll do our best to keep it as evergreen as possible. But barring something catastrophic, I think I can confidently say that the Thunder will still be one of the best stories in the NBA going into Wednesday night's matchup against the Knicks. 18-9 as currently stands on the season, 6th in net rating, 6th in offense, 6th in defense, or I should say even better in net rating. I believe they're 3rd in net rating and then 6th in offense and 6th in defense. One of the better stories in the league this year between what Shea's doing at an MVP level and what Chet's doing in his rookie season, and just seeing all these years of what they've built leading up to this. You tell me, Jacob, though, how are the vibes in OKC? Was this at all expected from the fan base?
So I think the fans were like cautiously optimistic coming into this season. Last season, they go 40-42, beat the New Orleans Pelicans in play-in game number 1, lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves in play-in game number 2. And so they miss out on the actual postseason, right? Not the play-in games. And coming into this season, there was excitement. The Thunder were projected by Vegas to be like a 43.5 win team. There was a big clump of teams in the Western Conference projected somewhere between like 42 and 45 wins. Oklahoma City is currently on a 56 win pace. Last season, they beat their over-under win total by, I think, 16 games. They are on pace to do that again this year, which is just absolutely absurd. The second youngest team in the NBA, if they make a move at the deadline, presumably with the Davis Bertans contract, who is the oldest player on the team at, I believe, 29, that would presumably drop their team average age even lower, probably down to the lowest average age in the NBA. And they are still on that 56 game win pace. The vibes have been incredible. This team has been awesome, especially when you look at, the starting lineup features the oldest player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, at 25 years old.
Yeah.
So you're getting this taste, but if they keep the team together, which presumably they will, there's no reason not to. You have another 7 to 10 years of this. So it feels like we're just on the precipice of what could be a really, really exciting team for a really long time, for presumably the rest of the 2020s.
It sounds like you're telling me this team's ahead of schedule. And with what Shai has, really what started last year and led in to this season, when he finished top 5 in MVP, finished, I believe, first team All-NBA as well. And I would be shocked if we just did our All-NBA teams so far this season for our patrons. And I had Shai as a lock on my first team All-NBA. And I'm trying to solidify a Shai MVP case. And I want to talk to a Thunder fan. I'm glad you're here. Like, what is it like just to watch what he's become? Like, obviously, after the Paul George trade happened, you knew you were getting a ton of picks, but to see the evolution of going from like a solid rotation piece to clearly a starting point guard to clearly an all-star point guard to MVP candidate to, I'll just say it, MVP close to front runner at this point, especially when you look at the advanced metrics. What's it been like to watch Shai over the past few years?
Yeah, it's incredible. He came over in that Paul George trade, like you mentioned, that first season. It was the season of 3-point guards in Oklahoma City. It was Shai, it was Dennis Schroeder, and Chris Paul. And I think that tutelage under Chris Paul was massive for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Every time this guy takes a break from basketball during the offseason, he comes back better. Whenever he came out of high school to Kentucky, he was the lowest rated player in that Kentucky class out of the 7 guys they brought in. He didn't even start that year at Kentucky, ended up going in the lottery, has a great rookie season, and every year since then has made a leap. Even from last year to this year, he has made a leap. And you look at him, you're like, where does the next leap even come from? Because there's not many holes in that game anymore. And yeah, we were having discussions in our podcast probably as recently as 18 months ago on, is Shea like, can he be a number one guy on a finals team? He's probably a number two guy on a finals team. They probably still need to find their number one guy. Well, we had that wrong. Like you mentioned, I believe it was Tim Bontemps of ESPN recently did the MVP straw poll. Shea comes in fourth, right on the heels of Giannis Antetokounmpo, behind the Joker and Joel Embiid. I mean, those are three big dudes who have insanely efficient numbers. And then a point guard who's shooting 54% from the floor. Leads the league in steals by a country mile. Just the efficiency, the style of play. The rise has been incredible. And the dude's 25 years old. Like, he doesn't hit his physical peak for another 3 to 4 years. So
yeah, there's a frustration on behalf of some Knicks fans in that, like, obviously there's a Kentucky connection with a lot of the guys on the roster and some of the names that they chose when they initially built out this coaching staff, and like Emmanuel Quickley, Kentucky grad, Julius Randle, Kentucky grad, and there's like two things we point to when we do our like half-ass scouting. It's like, okay, well, are they a CAA client or did they go to Kentucky? Okay, so they're probably, the Knicks have an eye on them, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a part of Knicks fans that goes all the way back to 2018, and the Knicks had the 9th pick in the draft that year and chose Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's teammate, Kevin Knox, from the University of Kentucky. And like that draft, I don't like to do the what ifs with drafts, because I think it's largely a crapshoot, but that's the one I've always gone back to. That's like, man, anybody else but Kevin. Like, God bless him. I'm glad he's found, I mean, maybe I should be glad he's found a home in Detroit because of what's happened to them this season. But like, anybody after Kevin Knox turned out to be like a high level NBA contributor. And with Shai, like you mentioned the offense and the scoring and like the efficient way he's playing the game. And then he's an all defense candidate as well. Yeah. They have a 1A as, or maybe not a 1A, maybe they have a 1 and potentially looking for a 1A. I do have questions of whether Chet Holmgren can be that 1A with what we've seen this season. Like, he's off to an outstanding start. The advanced metrics love him. I think everybody came into this year being like, everybody's competing for second for Rookie of the Year because of what Wemby's going to do. And Chet's just like run away with Rookie of the Year as far as the odds are concerned. What he's been this year, did Thunder fans expect it? Did you expect it?
I knew Chet would be awesome. What Chet is doing this season, I thought these numbers and this efficiency and this impact on the game would be like year 3, year 4 Chet, not year 1 Chet. Like you mentioned, everybody was saying like, you're playing for second place in Rookie of the Year. I don't think it's close. Yeah. If you ran the votes now, it's a landslide. Chet might be an all-star reserve in the West this season. I mean, the efficiency, he's currently averaging 17 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2.7 blocks. He had 2 games back-to-back the other night where he had 15 blocks in 2 games. I mean, just put an absolute lid on the basket. The offense, the defense, I kind of expected because he's been a special defender since high school, since the Gonzaga days. The offense, though, has just been insane. Like, the 3-point shooting has been such a huge thing for his game. Being able to take guys off the dribble. A guy that big should not be that fluid. And the fact that he is, and kind of, you put a cap on it with, I'm sure a lot of NBA fans have seen this highlight against the Clippers the other night, where Chet goes the up and under, tosses it off the glass to himself for a dunk. He's just a hooper, man. He is a hooper. He gives me, and keep in mind, this is coming from somebody who's watched this Oklahoma City franchise since they relocated from Seattle. The offensive end gives me tons of Kevin Durant vibes.
Oh, really?
It gives me a lot of Kevin Durant vibes. There's been talks of people here in Oklahoma City who are very, very smart about this team, wondering if Shea's the second best player on this team in 3 years. And that's ridiculous because Shea is a top 3 MVP candidate. There is that much belief in what Chet Holmgren can do. Man, he's special.
So,
and I think missing that
jump
year
in real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
The Kevin Durant of it all. That's a fascinating. That's a take. Is where
I'm not saying he's going to be as good as KD.
No, but the fact that he can remind you of him.
Yeah.
So I guess because I'll just admittedly haven't watched him as much as I wish I could. With him being in a different time zone, a lot of his games are during Knicks games. If they're like starting at 8, and if they're not, then I'm also mostly watching for SGA. And I guess a lot of his offensive ability, I've seen it more in the catch and shoot and what he's been on the defensive end. Do you think he has that kind of ball handling skills with KD? Because that I thought was the thing that always separated KD. Was like, yes, he could shoot over anybody, but he could also get his own shot over anybody. You think he has the ball handling skills like Chet?
Think it's developing. It's getting there. So I've been out at Summer League the past 2 years to watch Chet play, and turnovers were a massive problem at Summer League, handling the ball. And that's the only live ball action we saw from Chet since he's been drafted up until this season. And so that was my worry, was he's going to be able to like catch lobs, play in the pick and roll a little bit as the roll man, catch and shoot from 3. He's the ball handler in pick and roll situations with this team. He's taking the ball from the perimeter, giving shot fakes, dribbling to the mid-range, getting into that mid-post action. It's coming along, and it's coming along quickly. Again, Kevin Durant is going to end up as like a top 10 player of all time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying Chet, you'd be dumb to say anybody's going to get there. Like, that's a take. But the way he plays offense is so KD-like. As somebody who watched Kevin Durant for years in Oklahoma City, a lot of the things I see Chet do, I'm like, man, I've watched this before. I've seen this movie before. And if he gets there, again, it's an incredibly tall task. The odds are incredibly slim that he does get there. But if he does, along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, along with Jalen J-Dub Williams, along with Josh Giddey, along with the 50 million draft picks they have that they can go do whatever the hell they want with, it's got a chance to be a really special team.
I mean, like you said, they're a year ahead of schedule already, and they're super young, and they're on pace for 56 wins. You mentioned do whatever the hell they want to do with these picks. So if I'm asking you on behalf of the Thunder base, what do they want to do? Is there a player in mind? Is there a move in mind? Are they just kind of happy with where things are and you just kind of want to see where this goes? What is the fan base longing for as far as potentially a move being done?
For sure. So you're asking what the fan base wants, not what the team is going to do. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Let's actually answer both questions. So what does the fan base want? And then what is the team going to do?
NBA basketball. The fans are chomping at the bit.
Okay.
Cash them in, baby. It's time to go. The most recent name has come up in the news a little bit. Utah Jazz forward Lauri Markkanen.
Yep.
On paper, seems like an ideal fit. You get another 7-footer next to Chet who can rebound the basketball, who can space the floor, doesn't need the ball in his hands, can primarily score off catch and shoot opportunities, catch and attack opportunities. Makes sense. The price is going to be astronomical. He is due for a contract extension, which he probably won't extend because of CBA rules. He'll probably wait and just sign a max deal once his contract is up. That might hamper what Oklahoma City can do with their other players moving forward. The fan base wants Lauri Markkanen. The fan base wants a splashy move. The team isn't going to make a splashy move. General Manager Sam Presti has said time and time again that they're going to wait and see what they have, which I think is the smart thing to do. Like, they look awesome, but you have to take a step back and realize Chet's played like 26 basketball games. Right? You haven't seen this team play in the playoffs yet. You don't really know what they need. And if you make an assumption now, I think this is what this team needs, and you make that move and you cash in the chips, and then what if you get 6, 8, 12 months down the line and that actually wasn't what you needed, and what you needed was a little more time and a little more of a sample size and a little more information before you made that move. I think the Thunder will do something at the trade deadline, something small. An idea might be maybe they cash in the Davis Bertans contract, a couple second rounders, and bring in a rental of like a Gordon Hayward from the Charlotte Hornets as like a bench wing, an adult in the room who's kind of been there before. That would make sense to me. If they were going to cash in the chips to make an all-in move on a star, I think they would do that no earlier than the summer of 2024. But I'm not convinced that that's the move they're going to make. If you brought in Lauri Markkanen, you're giving up shots for Chet and development time for him. You're taking away shots from Jalen Williams and curving his development. I almost think that the move is to go get like your 4th, 5th, or 6th guy in a trade. And also use those draft picks to move up the draft board to get more young talent. The Thunder have other teams' draft picks out to 2030 now. They have 17 picks in the next 7 years. They could stack picks on picks and just climb the draft board every year. That way, when Shea is 30, you're still bringing in a number 7, number 8, number 9 overall pick. And instead of making an all-in move now, you're supplementing the roster for years and years and years with lottery picks. That makes a little more sense to build on the longevity of this team rather than trading the 6 or 7 first-round picks to go get the next disgruntled superstar.
So, from what I gather, from what you're telling me, the fan base would love for them to make somewhat of an all-in move on Lauri. And I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. There is a portion of the Knicks fan base that also loves Lauri Markkanen. Some of us in Knicks Film School think like Julius Randle for Lauri Markkanen would be an upgrade. And they see, I mean, he's an advanced metrics darling. You mentioned that the fact that he is able to contribute the way he is in Utah without needing the ball is such a weapon. I think he's a 4, not a 3, which is why the idea of pairing him with Julius is just, I don't think it's a non-starter, although I'm starting to come around on the fact, just build the best offensive team as possible, and then maybe the defense can just be respectable and you're fine. But Lauri Markkanen has fans here in New York. And what you're telling me is that you think the Thunder as an organization, and what it sounds like is you personally also wouldn't go all in yet, and it would at least be at the earliest this summer to make any kind of all-in move after you've seen what this team does in the playoffs.
I think that's probably fair. Yes.
Okay. So what happens? There's a fascinating direction I could go with this now, because I think I fall somewhere in the middle of like, don't make an irrational move. But like you said, they have 17 picks over the next 7 years. So couldn't you make a move for Markkanen? And then he also gets his first playoff experience with the Thunder, with this core that is already on pace for 56 wins. And then like get your lumps in the playoffs this year, or see what the ceiling could be. And then you're growing with him like this, as if it started, he could be part of the core going forward, and then you still have all these other assets left over to make another move afterwards. Is that a fair projection or potential move that they could make?
I think so. Yeah. Part of my worry again, though, is I think the Thunder see at least their top 2 is Shea and Chet, and they don't want to put a cap on that. For this team, I think it makes more sense to go get somebody like, if you were trading for Cavs Lauri Markkanen or Bulls Lauri Markkanen, I think it's a different story. But once a player has broken out and is now kind of the focal point of an offense, to bring them into a new team and say, hey, scale it back, is so much more difficult than bringing in somebody and saying, we're going to try to scale you up. Right. And I wonder if that is what the Thunder will look more to do. Not bring in such again, Lauri's not like high usage because he doesn't need the ball in his hands, but the dude gets like 16 shots a game. And if you bring in somebody who takes 16 shots a game, you are then probably taking shots away from guys that are 21, 22, 23 compared to Laurie, who's about to be 28. And so I think the Thunder want to see a little more of what they have. I also think a trade for Laurie Markkinen probably, like the Jazz probably start off with, we want Jalen Williams.
That's the other part is you're mentioning the guys that would lose usage. And I'm like, I think Jalen Williams is in said deal. And then Ainge is like, also give me all the picks because you're going to have to blow me away with an offer.
And I don't think that's a deal Sam Presti makes.
Presti against Danny Ainge is like the two gamblers. Like it very much is a Western showdown in my mind. Now I'm coming from the city life, and so I apologize as I'm speaking to a Midwestern person if I'm referencing a Western showdown and it sounds completely ignorant. But that's that's my perspective here is that I see them walking 10 paces and then them turning around and it's suddenly like Jalen Williams. And it's like, you'll take 2 picks and you'll love it. And like, that's the showdown that they have. Like the two most difficult people to negotiate with, if you're trying to win a trade, is probably those two. And here you go. They may potentially be trade partners if it's in the future. I think from my perspective, I see what I love this Thunder roster. I love specifically Shea. And I'm like, I would probably go all in, but this is why I'm on a podcast with you and not making front office decisions. So I empathize with the fan base in OKC that potentially would want that move to be made. As far as expectations for the rest of the season, like what does a disappointing season look like then? Does it matter where they finish in the playoffs? Do they have goals now been set for this year with the start that this team has gotten off to?
It's a great question. I think it goes fan base versus team. Mm-hmm. The team will say there is no expectations. The fan base would disagree. I think the fan base is at a point now where even being in the play-in might be a disappointment. Like this should be a top 6 team in the West. I mean, hell, at the point of us recording this conversation, they're number 3 in the West. They just lost the number 2 spot after a loss to the Lakers last night. Denver jumped them to number 2. The West is insane. Like 1 through 10 all have an above 500 record. I'm at the point where I think they are going to be a playoff team, not a play-in team. I think they will be 1 through 6. I think the team, if you asked them, they would say, we're not putting expectations on this team. We're not putting a ceiling on this team. They're the youngest team in the league, yada, 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 right? I think the expectation now is you are playing in a playoff series. I'm almost to the point, Andrew, where I think it's like this team should have home court in the first round. Like they're that good.
I believe they're that good too, so I don't disagree with you.
And I say the West is stacked, but you look at teams like Phoenix. Like Phoenix cannot get it together, and bringing back Bradley Beal doesn't fix the problems Phoenix has. Golden State looks old. Yeah. And they got a Draymond Green problem. You have all these teams, the Houston Rockets, how long can they keep it up? Like, is it for real? There's so many different like questions for these teams. And the Thunder are just kind of sitting there like, we've internally developed, we have a process and they're succeeding. Why can't they be a home court team in the first round?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd probably have them as a 3 or 4 seed at the moment. I don't know if that holds true. I mean, the Phoenix stuff you mentioned the Knicks played them twice. And the first time I was like very impressed by their role players. And then the second time I was like very unimpressed by what that team looks like when, it's your turn, my turn with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Now their ceilings are great. They'll score a ton of points, but like Jalen Brunson had 50 points against them that night. Like they do not have an on-ball stopper. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, like that can be Shea in a playoff series. So it's not just that you have to try and if it like say like they end up falling to the 4 seed, the Thunder, and it's them against the Suns. Like who's stopping Shea in that series?
It's a great question.
I don't know who's stopping him from getting downhill. Who's stopping him from the point of attack? So I look, it'd be a fascinating series to watch, and I think that's why I empathize with the Thunder fan that's like, go all in now, because like, imagine you get past the first round, and you're like, man, we just needed some offensive firepower to contend with this Clipper team that's nuts, or this Denver team that's nuts. But we'll obviously see what happens. A couple things before I let you get out of here. So I sent this to you as a topic of the Mount Rushmore of rivals. I asked this of anybody because I'm curious what rivalries exist amongst fan bases, and like who, like we in New York, we have the dates that we circle on the calendar once the season schedule gets released. And I'm curious who the 4 Mount Rushmore of rivals is for you, for Thunders fans in general. Who are the 4 teams whose games you get up for whenever they show up on the schedule?
I think number 1 right now has to be the Houston Rockets.
Okay.
There was
Based
this
on what?
There was this like both were quote unquote like tanking at the same time, right? Rockets get Jalen Brunson, or sorry, not Jalen Brunson. I'm sorry,
Jalen Green. Yeah.
I'm on a Knicks podcast. I got Brunson.
No, believe me, I get it. But I'm now starting to connect the dots. That's also like Chris Paul got traded for Westbrook. Like there's that trade that existed too.
The Harden trade from way back in the day.
That's right. Okay.
There's a lot of beef between like the fan base going back, and that beef has like intensified. There's the kind of getting more niche into it. The Thunder traded pick 16 in 2021 to the Rockets, and the Rockets selected Alperen Şengün, and the Thunder got 2 picks in return and slid back to 18 and selected Trey Mann. So there's this whole like, oh, the Thunder gave Houston Alpi, who's now playing well. Now there's this whole like Şengün versus Chet, like which guy is better? I don't think it's even a question, but there's a lot of hostility between those two fan bases. So Houston's probably number 1.
Okay.
Golden State's number 2. Again, a lot of history. The Clay Game 6 in Oklahoma City.
Kevin Durant. Yeah.
I sat there in the arena with my head in my hands as fourth quarter Clay went off.
Can I ask a follow up? Because you were in the building for Durant's last game in OKC. Like, so going into that game, did you think the series was over, that you were going to win that series?
100%.
Okay. So leaving the building,
going into halftime of Game 6, I was like, it's done.
Okay. Well, for those who don't remember that game, Thunder were up late in that game. That's a fun. Okay, for me, it's a fun YouTube rewatch to go.
Yeah, I have not rewatched that game. I'm
not surprised. It's a game you don't revisit. I understand completely. But I mean, what I do remember about that season from an off the court perspective was the questions about KD's future. And I mean, a lot of people speculated that he would leave. I personally thought he was going to sign for at least 1 more year. And then obviously he did, what he did that off season. Did you think, or did you know going into Game 7 that this could potentially be Kevin Durant's last game in a Thunder uniform?
Never crossed my mind.
Really? So that blindsided you.
Thunder fans, I would even say the Thunder front office, everyone convinced that he was coming back. People forget they had already made the Victor Oladipo trade, Serge Ibaka for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis before Kevin Durant left in free agency. They had a handshake agreement with Al Horford that Al was going to come over and play the 5 in Oklahoma City because Al was a free agent that summer. And if you remember, the Thunder traded Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis the next offseason for Paul George. They could have still done that deal and had Russ, PG, KD, and Al Horford on this team. Everything was lined up. Complete blindside. That 4th of July morning when the Players Tribune piece came out, I was like, oh, it's KD's announcing he signed the extension or re-signed with Oklahoma City. We're coming back. And I didn't even read the Players Tribune piece. I just scrolled to the bottom and I saw Golden State. And am I allowed to use profanity on your show?
You can use profanity, yes.
Completely shit my pants July 4th morning. Like blew me away. Could not believe it. So there's that history. even more history with these two teams, like Draymond Green kicking Steven Adams in the nuts multiple times and getting away with it, not getting suspended in that series, but getting suspended in the following series. Golden State's number 2 on the circle it. They're the rival list.
Okay.
I think to a lesser degree, 3 and 4, probably the Los Angeles Lakers and the Dallas Mavericks. Mavericks because of proximity. They always have incredible games. This season, it was the Mavs 30-0 run in the fourth quarter and still losing. Last season, it was Isaiah Joe coming in and scoring 15 points off the bench in the final 4 minutes in I believe his Thunder debut to beat the Dallas Mavericks. A lot of really fun games between those two. Obviously, now there's a fun conversation, Shea versus Luka. So I think the Mavs and the Lakers are probably numbers 3 and 4. I don't really have an order for those two, though.
It sounds like you said there's a drop off after number 2.
For sure.
It's 1, it's 2, and then there's any combination. If a third rival showed up like in a playoff series, like say they did play the Suns this year, that could potentially take the place as number 3.
Definitely.
I appreciate you. I'm sure that brought back some dark thoughts. So I appreciate you coming back.
Reliving some trauma on Christmas Eve.
Yes, exactly. It's potentially a therapy session as well here at Knicks Film School. By the way, we didn't have time to like bring him up. I love Isaiah Joe. Like we have Emmanuel Quickly here, who's just a plus minus god. And every single time he comes in, he contributes. And then every single time you go to the plus minus stats and you just see like Emmanuel Quickly, Isaiah Joe. It's like the only 2 non-starters that are like contributing in the way that they are as role players, but like also as just like net positives no matter what is happening with them. Last thing before you get out of here, any thoughts on the Knicks and what they've done so far this season, or any questions about the Knicks to ask on a Knicks podcast?
I love what the Knicks are doing. Jalen Brunson is incredible. Dallas completely fumbled the bag, letting him leave. Completely fumbled the bag. I think the Knicks are fun. I empathize with you guys with the Mitchell Robinson injury. That sucks.
Yeah.
I think this game between the Thunder and the Knicks is going to be very interesting. One of the places where the Thunder have struggled this season is closing out defensive possessions with rebounds. And one place that the Knicks have fed all year long is hitting the glass. So that's going to be interesting. The Thunder play a bit of a smaller lineup with J-Dub at the 4. If he guards Julius Randle, that's going to be interesting. Shea versus Jalen Brunson. I think it's a really fun matchup. And maybe it's just, again, you apologized earlier for the city mindset versus like the small market.
Yeah,
my turn to return the favor.
Do it. Go ahead.
I hear all the time, like, the Knicks are ready to trade for a star. The Knicks are ready to trade for a star. And I look at it from the small market perspective. I'm like, man, just keep building. You've got something good going. You don't got to cash in and trade everything to go get the next disgruntled guy. Like, keep building it up. Now, if the Donovan Mitchell rumors are true, like that would be a really fun backcourt. But I think the Knicks are going on the right direction. I love the identity, the grittiness of the team. And you want to talk about another 2 teams that have had some great games recently in the past few seasons. I think back to last year, Thunder Knicks in the Garden, I believe on a early Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, it was a matinee game. Yeah,
Thunder won, but it was a high scoring game. Josh Giddey had like some absurd stat line. Really fun game. So I'm looking forward to seeing the Knicks in Oklahoma State. I will actually be at that game, so I'm very excited for it.
So the game that you're referencing last year, we do a game at the Garden once a year, or we have done a game every year at MSG where we take a bunch of our patrons and we sit in a suite, and that Thunder game was the game that we attended.
Oh wow!
So getting to watch Shea up close, getting to watch so many points get scored, and I believe that was at the time like one of the. I mean, now everybody scores 140 points, but it was like one of the first times the Knicks have allowed 140 points in a basketball game in forever. And then obviously last year and this year, that's been eclipsed a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was also a turning point a bit for the Knicks, because then they went on a road trip and then Evan Fournier left the rotation for good and Quentin Grimes went into the starting 5 for good at the time. And it was like a pivot toward more defensive minded two guards on the team. So I'm curious what the Knicks do, because like this life after Mitchell Robinson, I actually do think that they'll be fine in the starting five spot with Isaiah Hartenstein taking over. He's the best backup in the league. He's like an average starting center in the league, and like I've been fine with their offense with him in there over Mitch. It's the defense that I'm curious if it holds up, and like the Thunder are a good test because they're going to try and get to the rim as much as possible, and Mitch was like a rim protection machine. And I would like to see if our backup center can be a full-time starting center. And then there's the fact that the Knicks don't really have a backup center at the moment. This would be a game if Tibbs is able to go against his own religion and surrender some rim protection. This would be a game to go with Julius at the 5. We saw it a little bit on Wednesday against Brooklyn. They played like a portion of the second quarter with Julius Randle playing center and Josh Hart playing power forward, and the offense looked fine, and they didn't grab a rebound. They just, like, in the stretch that lineup was on the floor, it was like, oh, so they are not going to be able to get a rebound while this lineup is in. And I suspect something like that would happen in this game too, while recognizing that if you want to match the Thunder going small, then that's the way to potentially do it. So, I'm curious what lineups, Dagnall throws out there that potentially Tibbs can counter with. I agree with you about if Julius Randle is going to dominate, he's hopefully going to dominate a game like this,
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. And you mentioning the going small, like Josh Hart versus J-Dub, if they both play the 4, that's the pointing Spider-Man meme to me. That would be really fun. Randall versus Chet would be a very fascinating matchup. The Thunder like to go really small off the bench and play 6'6" Kenrich Williams at center whenever they sub Chet Holmgren off. So that will be interesting. The kind of back and forth, the cat and mouse game with the lineups is going to be really fascinating that night.
Also, the Knicks won the game in OKC last year after they had made the lineup change. And I think this is where I'm just personally going to miss Mitchell Robinson, where I know that there's a sentiment from the fan base that will be fine. And I'm just like, the one elite thing the Knicks had was his offensive rebounding. And that's just disappeared. And I would have been like, this is a game I actually have confidence in, that the Knicks will have an elite possession creator. They're just going to win the possession battle no matter what in this game. And that's just gone. And now, like, I think I'm more just fascinated who's going to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for 4 quarters while the Knicks' 2 best defenders are coming off the bench at the moment. So, like, I don't trust Jalen Brunson, obviously, against him. I think DiVincenzo and RJ can make his life more difficult, but not, like, impossible to succeed in. So I am also fascinated by this matchup, and I guess we'll see what happens on Wednesday night. Obviously the Thunder coming off a back-to-back after they play the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I guess we'll see how this matchup turns out. Jacob, you've been great with your time, especially on Christmas Eve. I really appreciate it. We'll have to link up again when we have more time to talk on not a holiday and see where our teams are at the time. Before you get out of here, please let the fine folks at home know where they can find you and all your stuff.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah. So the Uncontested Podcast, we cover the OKC Thunder and the league as a whole. You can find us wherever you download your podcasts at. We're also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, every place you can get basketball coverage. We're there. You can also follow me. I'm at Jacob Kniffen on Twitter. Talk a whole bunch of shit and a whole bunch of basketball. So it's a good time.
Absolutely. Jacob, thank you for joining me, and a happy holidays.
Hey, you too. Thank you.